During a family dinner at my daughter's house, I barely managed to keep myself from losing my temper. I went into the kitchen just to get a glass of water, but what I saw there turned everything upside down. It was a Tuesday morning when the phone rang, and I came close to letting it go. 4 months without a word from my daughter, then her name lit up my screen like a specter drifting in from another life. Dad. Claire's voice had that soft, honeyed quality she always pulled out when she was after something. It's been a while, I know, but I thought maybe you'd want to come by for dinner sometime next week. The grandkids have been asking about you. I set my eyes on the mug sitting in front of me, the one that read Allegheny County Prosecutor's Office. 28 years behind that title. That mug was a parting token from a life that still felt more solid than whatever this phone call was. The grandkids missed me. Sure they did. Silence hung between us. Welcome back to Dad's Revenge, and if you're finding this channel for the first time, I'm glad you landed here. Before we get into this story, if it moves you, tap subscribe, so the next one can find you too. Now, let me ask you something. Is this your first time listening here, or have you been with us a while? Drop it in the comments, I read everyone. A quick note before we begin, some elements of this story have been shaped for the telling, and any resemblance to real people or events is purely coincidental. What matters is the truth underneath the story. I miss you too, Dad. The last time we'd spoken, she'd asked for $15,000 for the roof, she'd said. 2 weeks on her Facebook had a gleaming Tesla Model X sitting in their Shadyside driveway. When I brought it up, she'd called me controlling. Garrett had called me worse. What's the occasion, I asked. Does there need to be one? It's almost Christmas. Family time. Family. That word landed hollow. I thought about the $50,000 I'd lent them 3 years ago toward their house, down payment, still no sign of repayment. I thought about their wedding, the $32,000 I'd scraped together because every girl deserves her dream day. I thought about every Sunday dinner I'd hosted, every school play I'd shown up for, every time I'd put Claire first. Sure, I said. I'll be there. The week crawled by. I kept to my routine morning walks through Squirrel Hill Coffee at Commonplace Coffee Chess with Rudy Holt at the community center. Rudy had put in 20 years as a detective with Pittsburgh PD before moving over to financial crimes. Sharp mind, sharper instincts. You look worried, he said, moving his bishop. Claire invited me to dinner. He whistled low. After 4 months, what's she want? That's the question, isn't it? Rudy captured my night. Leonard, I've known you since you prosecuted the Riverside corruption case. You taught me to trust my gut. What's yours saying? That this isn't about the kids missing their grandpa. Then why go? I move my rook. Because she's still my daughter. The night arrived cold and clear. I drove my 12-year-old Toyota Camry through streets strung with holiday lights toward the house I'd helped them buy. 317 Devonshire Street sat in Shadyside's most expensive neighborhood houses, pushing $600,000 manicured lawns, 3-car garages. Their mortgage had to run $3,200 a month at a minimum, on Garrett's non-profit salary. The front door swung open before I reached it. Claire stood there in a designer dress I'd never seen her smile wide and brittle. Dad, you made it. She pulled me into a quick hug. Perfume, expensive and unfamiliar. The house behind her gleamed. New furniture, fresh paint, everything radiating money they had no business spending. Garrett materialized in the hallway, 6'2", of practiced charm wrapped in a custom suit. Leonard, good to see you, sir. His handshake was firm enough to make a point. Come in, come in. We've got quite the spread tonight. The dining room table could have seated 12. Beef tenderloin, crab legs, wine that probably cost more than my weekly grocery run. The kids 6 and 4 sat quietly in clothes still creased from the store. This is incredible, I said, because what else was there to say? Garrett got a bonus from the foundation, Claire said quickly. Too quickly. They're doing amazing work. Heroes Hope Foundation. Garrett poured wine like he was performing for an audience. We raised over $400,000 this year for veterans. Prosthetics, counseling, housing assistance, life-changing work. I watched him talk. This man who'd married my daughter 8 years ago. Back then he'd been earnest, hard-working, grateful for every door that opened. When had the gratitude curdled into entitlement? When had the warmth become something calculated? That's generous, I said. Veterans deserve every bit of support they can get. My father had served in Vietnam, come home carrying wounds that left no visible marks. He taught me about service sacrifice, honor things that had apparently skipped a generation. Exactly. Garrett leaned forward. Which is why I wanted to talk to you tonight, Leonard. We're launching a new initiative. Garrett let him eat first. Claire's interruption was sharp, but Garrett was already up and moving, pacing the room like he owned every inch of it. This can't wait, honey. Leonard, we need $25,000 for a pilot program. 6 months in, we could double our reach. But funding timelines are tight, and I thought, well, you've always been generous with Claire. This would be putting your money towards something that genuinely matters. And there it was. The real reason behind the dinner, the smiles, the untouched food on my plate. $25,000, I repeated. It's tax deductible, he said, as though that settled the matter. And honestly, what else are you doing with your pension? Sitting on it, while people who serve this country go without. The presumption knocked the air out of me. Claire wouldn't look at me. I appreciate the thought. I kept my voice steady. But that's not something I'm in a position to do right now. Garrett's smile went tight. Can't or won't. Does it matter, Dad? Claire's voice had an edge to it. These are veterans who need help. I know what veterans need, I said quietly. I also know what family is supposed to mean. Or what it used to. The temperature in that room dropped 20 degrees. Garrett's jaw locked. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm still waiting on the $50,000 I lent you 3 years ago. That was different, Claire snapped. That was our home, our future, and you were going to pay it back. We've had expenses, like a $78,000 BMW. The words came out sharper than I intended, like a Tesla, like a house that's twice what you need. Garrett pushed back from the table and stood. I think you should leave. I think so too. I rose my napkin, dropping to the floor like a white flag. Claire's face had gone, red tears gathering, but they felt rehearsed. How long had I been a line item to these people instead of their family? Walking toward the door, something shifted in me. Not anger, not yet. Just a cold, clear recognition of exactly what I'd become to the people I loved most. Dad, wait, Claire called out, but I was already through the door. The December air cut through my jacket. I sat in the car a long moment, hands trembling. Not from hurt, from something else. A feeling I knew from my prosecutor days, when a case finally snapped into focus. Then my chest tightened, pressure spreading, breath going shallow. I'd felt this before, stress-induced hypertension. My doctor had told me to stay calm, keep away from confrontation. I reached for my phone to call him, then stopped. Through the front window, I could see Garrett gesturing in anger, Claire in tears. My grandchildren sat motionless at that lavish table, watching their parents' polished facade begin to split. I needed water. Maybe I needed to try once more. I stepped out of the car and went back to the house. I didn't knock. The door wasn't locked. They'd left it open, confident I wasn't coming back. Pride does that, makes you careless. The argument carried through the foyer, Garrett's voice sharp and bitter. Your father always has to make everything about himself. Always the righteous prosecutor looking down on people. Claire said, defensive, quieter. No, he understands perfectly. He likes keeping you dependent, control through money, classic manipulation. I stood there with one hand on my chest, feeling the pressure ease a fraction. Strange how anger can drown out physical pain. But I still needed that water. My mouth tasted like copper. The kitchen was just off the dining room through an archway to the left. I moved quietly, a prosecutor's instinct still sharp 5 years into retirement. In court, I'd trained myself to observe, to catch what others let slip past. That habit hadn't retired. The kitchen was another showpiece. Quartz countertops, restaurant-grade appliances, recessed lighting that probably cost more than my first car. And there on the island lay an open leather portfolio. I wasn't snooping. I was reaching for a glass from the cabinet when the header caught my eye. Heroes Hope Foundation. Financial Overview. Q3 2023. 28 years as a prosecutor teaches you to recognize certain patterns. Invoice discrepancies, irregular payment schedules, ghost vendors. The documents practically announce themselves. Patriot Medical Supply, $47,000. Never heard of them. A quick scan turned up 3 more. Freedom Prosthetics, $62,000. Veterans First Equipment, $58,000. My hands moved on instinct, phone out, camera open. The habit of preserving evidence never leaves you. I photographed the first page, then the second. Bank statements showing wire transfers into accounts in Delaware corporate shelter for people with something to hide. The foundation had pulled in $427,000. Disbursements to actual veterans, maybe $40,000. The rest had dissolved into a lattice of shell companies and offshore accounts. My father's face came to me. How he'd struggled after Vietnam, waiting months for the VA to approve his disability claim. How he'd had to choose between medication and groceries. How he died still believing his country had honored his service. Garrett was stealing from men like my father. "What are you doing?" I turned. Garrett stood in the archway, his expression sliding from confusion to alarm as he registered what I was holding. The portfolio, his financial confession. "Those are private documents." He stepped forward, hand extended. "These are evidence." My voice came out flat, stripped of everything but fact. "You've been embezzling from a veterans charity, Garrett. Wire fraud, falsified tax documents. These Delaware accounts, let me guess you're the beneficial owner tucked behind an LLC. The color drained from his face, then rushed back. "You went through my things. They were sitting open on your own kitchen counter because you never imagined anyone might actually look. Arrogance is expensive, Garrett. You can't. You have no right." I raised my phone and started dialing. "What are you doing?" Panic crept into his voice. "Calling 911. He lunged 6 feet 230 years younger than me, but I'd spent a career reading desperate people." I stepped to the side, let his own momentum carry him past. He caught the counter's edge, breathing hard. "You're making a huge mistake," he said through his teeth. "Those are confidential foundation documents. You're trespassing." 911, what's your emergency? Leonard Pruitt, 317, Devonshire Street, Shadyside. Financial crimes to report. Embezzlement from a federally funded charity. Documentary evidence in hand. Garrett's face ran through a whole sequence: denial, then fury, then fear, then cold calculation. Like watching a poker cheat discover every card had been turned face up against him. "Dad?" Claire stepped into the doorway, eyes swollen. "What's going on?" "Your husband has been robbing wounded veterans," I told her, keeping my voice even. "Roughly $400,000. "That's a lie." Garrett's pitch climbed. "Claire, he's unhinged. He forced his way in and rifled through our personal files. I came through an open, unlocked door because I was feeling ill. Those files were lying open on your kitchen island, and, if I'm not mistaken, Heroes Hope Foundation pulled federal grants last year, which makes what Garrett did federal wire fraud. 5 to 20 years. The dispatcher told me to hold the line. Sirens were already audible. Shadyside had that going for it, response times, under 4 minutes on average. Claire's gaze moved back and forth between us, watching her world come apart at its seams. "Garrett, tell me this isn't real." "Of course it isn't, baby. He's making it up. He's furious because we stopped letting him run our lives. The bank records show $397,000 in wire transfers routed to Delaware shell corporations." I said phones still raised the photographs visible on the screen. "Every one of those invoices is a fiction. Patriot Medical Supply gives an address that turns out to be a UPS store in Monroeville. I spent 30 years prosecuting schemes exactly like this one. Claire, I recognize what I'm looking at." She pulled away from Garrett as though touching him had suddenly become dangerous. "You swore those donations were reaching veterans. You got up in front of the Chamber of Commerce and told everyone about the mother whose boy came home without his legs. We did help people." Garrett's voice fractured. "The foundation did real work. Maybe some operational expenses got muddled. Maybe the bookkeeping became more complex than it should have. Legitimate operational costs don't get routed through Delaware LLCs," I said. Red and blue light pulsed through the kitchen glass. Garrett's eyes went to the door, to me, to Claire. I could see him running the options. Run, fight, deflect. He picked deflect. "This is a vendetta," he said, his voice abruptly smooth and controlled. "You've had it out for me from the beginning, Leonard. You never could accept that Claire picked me, that we made something you had no hand in. Now you're calling in favors from your old prosecutor network to tear us apart. Clever, get the story out before the uniforms walked through the door. I'd shown that move to plenty of ADAs over the years." The bell rang. Claire stayed rooted to the spot, so I stepped around her past Garrett's silent fury and pulled the door open. Rudy Holt was standing there in plainclothes, shield clipped at his belt, 2 officers in uniform behind him. "Leonard." His gaze swept the room in a practiced second. Dispatch made it sound serious. "It is," I said, "embezzlement from a federally funded veterans charity. I've got photographs of the documents. They were in the open when I came in for a glass of water." Rudy's face stayed neutral, but his whole bearing shifted. Something clicked over. The subject, Garrett Decker, director of Heroes Hope Foundation. Rudy signaled the uniforms with a tilt of his head, and they moved past me into the room. Garrett was already on his phone lawyer, most likely. Claire hadn't moved her expensive dress, starting to look like something she'd borrowed for, a part she hadn't auditioned for. Mr. Decker. Rudy's voice had that particular authority that only comes from 2 decades of doing the job. Detective Holt Pittsburgh, PD Financial Crimes. I have some questions about Heroes Hope Foundation. I want my attorney, Garrett said at once. That's your right. Rudy shifted toward me. Leonard, I'll need those photos transferred and a full statement. I passed him my phone and watched his eyes track across the images, absorbing the same thing I had. 28 years of working cases together. No explanation needed. These documents need to be secured as evidence, Rudy said. Mr. Decker, are you the beneficial owner of the LLCs in these Delaware filings? Attorney Garrett said again. Understood. Rudy turned to the officers. We're taking these materials into evidence, potential federal criminal matter. Mr. Decker, no arrest at this time, but make yourself available for questioning. Claire finally spoke. There's been some kind of mistake here. There's an explanation for all of it, ma'am. There usually is, one of the officers said, not without kindness. He moved through the kitchen, photographing everything systematically before sliding it into evidence bags. I stood back and watched my daughter's life being cataloged and carried out in boxes. The foyer grandfather clock, worth maybe $5,000, struck 8. 8 o'clock on an evening that had opened with beef tenderloin and was closing out with evidence bags. Garrett's gaze locked onto mine. Nothing behind it but raw hate. You'll regret this. Maybe I said. Those veterans won't. Rudy touched my elbow. Come outside, give me your statement. I went with him into the cold December air, leaving Claire behind in her immaculate magazine-spread kitchen, reckoning at last with who her husband actually was and who her father had been all along. The uniformed officers followed with armloads of boxed evidence. Rudy already had the federal prosecutor's office on his phone. Wire fraud with interstate transfers. Federal jurisdiction, and it would move quickly. You holding up? Rudy asked under his breath. Not really, I said. But I'm not wrong. No, he said, gripping my shoulder briefly. You're not. The week that followed was a fog of written statements, sit-down interviews, and calls I let go to voicemail. Rudy kept me in the loop. The FBI had picked up the file. Federal prosecutors were assembling their case. Forensic accountants were going line by line through every transaction Garrett had ever touched. The machinery I'd once helped operate was running again, patient and unstoppable. Claire never called. I kept telling myself I'd seen that coming. I hadn't. Saturday morning, my neighbor Bernice Langford showed up at my door carrying a casserole I didn't want, and a kind of steady concern I needed more than I'd admit. 40 years as a nurse had given her an eye for suffering that people tried to conceal. You look awful, she said, brushing past me. Good morning to you too. Don't give me that Leonard Pruitt. She put the dish on my counter, ham and potato from the smell. The whole block is buzzing. Cora Pelham watched the squad cars at your daughter's place. Said officers were hauling out boxes. Wealthy suburbs, small town memories. Bigger houses, same reach. It's a complicated situation, I said. Isn't it always? She helped herself to my coffee, no invitation sought, folded herself into the breakfast nook like it was her regular seat. Feel like talking? Not especially. Then sit there and let me. She took a sip and made a face at my bad coffee. I've watched Claire grow up since she was 6, chasing fireflies in your yard. Bright kid, kind. Then Garrett came along, and something started shifting. Subtly at first, fewer old friends, a handbag that cost more than her paycheck, a smile that stopped landing in her eyes. I took the chair across from her. Outside snow had begun coming down slow and muffled. Sometimes people grow into whoever they married, Bernice said. Sometimes that person was already there, just needing someone to unlock them. Which one is she? I'm not sure I know anymore. You know, you're scared of what knowing means. The coffee was bitter going down, or perhaps it was just everything else. He was robbing veterans, people who surrendered everything. My father wore that uniform. I remember Bernice said, her tone going soft. And what you did tonight was right, Leonard. Hold on to that. My phone went off. Text from Rudy. Call when you get a chance. Something's developed. I got up, walked to my study, closed the door. Dialed. We took him in this morning, Rudy said straight into it. Federal charges across the board, wire fraud, embezzlement filing, false tax returns. Bail came in at $250,000. I let that sit. Garrett wouldn't have that lying around. Nothing clean anyway. How did he handle it? Like someone who spent his whole life believing wealth was a get-out-of-jail card. Rudy's voice was flat. His attorneys already spinning personal vendetta evidence improperly obtained the whole playbook. I didn't force entry into that house. I know it and the prosecutors know it, but brace yourself. They'll play rough. Garrett's brought in Clifton Harker. I let out a slow breath. Harker was the most expensive defense attorney in Pittsburgh, $500 an hour, known less for winning on the facts than for making juries distrust the people presenting them. $40,000 to $50,000 before the trial even starts. I said, desperate people write very large checks. A silence. Leonard, one more thing. Claire put up the bail money. That landed differently than it should have. How'd she manage it? Liquidated her jewelry, borrowed from Garrett's family. She's publicly behind him, now announced a press conference for Monday. She's saying you've always tried to control her, that you resented her building a life you couldn't oversee. I turned to the window. Snow kept falling, smoothing everything over, making the city look honest. She genuinely believes what he's told her, I said. Or she's put in 8 years and 2 children and can't afford to face what she built it on. A house bought with money that looked legitimate. Hard to abandon that story. Hard doesn't begin to cover it. I stayed in my study a long while after we rang off. This room was my whole career arranged on shelves and walls. Awards from the Pennsylvania Prosecuting Attorneys Association. A governor's letter of commendation. Pictures marking every conviction, every case that closed right. 28 years of trusting that justice meant something. Turned out, justice for my own daughter felt indistinguishable from loss. Monday's press conference unfolded precisely the way Harker had designed it. Garrett took his place beside Claire on the steps of the Allegheny County Courthouse, a studied display of humility, in a suit that ran more than my pension check. Claire wore black, appropriately somber eyes, red in a way I hoped wasn't rehearsed. My father-in-law is a decent man, she told the cameras, her voice carrying just enough tremor. But he spent his whole life needing to be in charge. When Garrett and I carved out our own path, our own success, he couldn't make peace with it. This prosecution is nothing more than a bitter old man refusing to let go. Harker stepped in, seamlessly talking about irregularities and how the evidence had been gathered about Leonard Pruitt's well-documented history of hard-edged prosecution tactics, about how the true victims in all this were the Decker family. 2 young children watching their father be hounded. I watched it by myself in my living room. The local news led with it. My phone lit up. Former colleagues from the prosecutor's office, old friends, people I hadn't heard from in years. Most of them were supportive. Some had questions. A few didn't reach out at all, and I noticed. The Pittsburgh Post-Gazette ran a feature that Wednesday. Former prosecutor Leonard Pruitt Justice or Vengeance. They talked to Claire, to Garrett's attorney, to board members from Heroes Hope Foundation. The photograph they chose of me was pulled from a corruption trial 15 years back. I looked severe and merciless, the exact image Harker was trying to sell. They interviewed me too briefly. I gave them the plain facts. I observed evidence of a crime, and I reported it. That's what any citizen ought to do. The line they printed, Pruitt admits to examining private financial records. Context, as I'd known for 3 decades, was always the first thing a good story threw overboard. Rudy called Thursday morning. How are you holding together better days? Yeah, well, you may want to find something stronger than coffee before I say this. Garrett's filing a civil suit against you. Defamation, invasion of privacy, intentional infliction of emotional distress, $500,000 in damages. I actually laughed. Couldn't stop myself. He picks veterans' pockets and I end up the villain. His attorney is Sharp Leonard. He's positioning this whole thing around you, not around the evidence. Put a grieving daughter in front of a jury. Add a family man devoted to helping heroes, then paint you as a resentful ex-prosecutor, nursing a grudge. The evidence doesn't lie. Evidence stops mattering the moment the narrative gets strong enough. You taught me that. He was right. I had taught him exactly that, back when I was the one constructing cases, shaping the story into something a jury of ordinary people could grab hold of. The feds are solid on their end, Rudy continued. Financial forensics came back. They traced $397,000 through a chain of shell companies in Delaware and the Caymans. Turns out Garrett was hemorrhaging it through offshore casinos, wire transfers, crypto conversions, the whole circuit. Gambling. That caught me off guard. Online poker, mostly high-stakes tables. He was in the hole about $180,000 before he clawed some of it back. The foundation had become his personal ATM. I turned that over in my mind. Garrett's recklessness made a different kind of sense now. Not pure greed addiction, the sort that convinces you one big win will square everything, so you keep reaching into other people's money to fund the next hand. When does the federal trial start? I asked. May at the earliest, these cases don't move fast. But, Leonard, the civil suit against you lands next month. And unlike a federal courtroom that one runs on perception, not on facts. After Rudy hung up, I sat in the dimming study as the light went out of the afternoon. Through the window, my street looked undisturbed. Old houses, old trees, the kind of block that seemed to promise nothing terrible could take root there. I'd spent 30 years learning that no neighborhood came with that guarantee. What I was absorbing now was that sometimes the people you prosecuted in your head had been sitting across your dinner table for years. Sometimes they called you Dad. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. This is Adriana Fuentes, federal prosecutor. I'm lead on the Decker case. We should talk. Coffee tomorrow, 10 a.m., Calliope Coffee. Adriana. I'd mentored her 15 years ago when she came out of law school, raw, eager, still believing prosecution was about doing right rather than winning. She'd gone federal, built a name in white-collar crime. I typed back, I'll be there. Something in my chest eased a fraction. Not quite relief, but a sense that this thing had someone steering it who understood what it was actually about. That night, I went looking through old photo albums, found pictures of Claire as a girl, birthday candles, school performances, the summer we drove to Ocean City in a station wagon that barely made it. She'd been 9, filling her pockets with shells, laughing at nothing in particular. When had that child vanished, or had she ever been anything more than what I'd chosen to see? Calliope Coffee sat in the Penn Avenue Arts District, the kind of place where lawyers held meetings they didn't want logged at the office. I came 15 minutes early, took black coffee, and watched the entrance. Adriana Fuentes walked through the door at exactly 10 o'clock, tailored suit briefcase that cost more than my monthly pension, the bearing of someone whose wins outnumbered her losses. She'd been 25 the last time I'd seen her in any professional capacity, idealistic, still unguarded. Now she was 40, precise and unsentimental. Leonard, she shook my hand without ceremony. You look well. You were always a terrible liar. She smiled, ordered an espresso, settled in across from me. I've been through the full file. It's solid. Forensic accounting traced every dollar, Delaware LLCs, Cayman accounts, crypto transfers into offshore gambling platforms. Garrett Decker is facing serious time, but Harker's already filed 17 motions. Suppression of evidence, prosecutorial misconduct, selective prosecution. He's constructing a story that you engineered the entire thing out of personal grievance. I sipped my coffee, better than what I brewed at home, which wasn't exactly a high bar. The evidence holds up on its own. Evidence doesn't speak for itself, Leonard. You taught me that. She opened her tablet, pulled up Harker's motion to dismiss. Read this. Mr. Pruitt, a former prosecutor with 28 years of experience in evidence collection and criminal procedure, deliberately positioned himself to discover documents he knew would be present, then leveraged law enforcement contacts to launch an investigation designed to dismantle his son-in-law's career and standing. I walked in looking for water after an argument in which I'd called out their financial recklessness after they hit me up for money. Harker will frame it differently. Adriana set the tablet face down. He's skilled at what he does, and juries will reach for a sympathetic defendant over complicated financial documents every time. So, what is it you actually need from me? Complete honesty. She leaned in. Did you have suspicions about Garrett before that night? I gave it real thought. Not in any specific way, but I knew the picture didn't add up. The cars, the house, a lifestyle that made no sense on a nonprofit director's income. I'd told myself maybe Claire had money from somewhere I didn't know about. Maybe Garrett's family was floating them, but you didn't dig into it. I'm retired Adriana. I play chess and drink bad coffee. I don't run investigations on my own family. Until you did. The words just sat there between us. Outside, January snow had started again, coating Grant Street in fresh white. What's the schedule, I asked. Grand jury convenes next week. Indictments are a formality. At this point, we have bank records, emails, sworn testimony from the foundation's former accountant, the one they pushed out when she began raising questions. Trial penciled in for early May. But Leonard, the civil suit hits next month, and that's where things get complicated. How so? Harker's whole approach is to put you in the dock instead of Garrett. If he can persuade a civil jury that you violated Garrett's privacy, that your motives were personal, he plants doubt that carries over into the criminal trial, creates reasonable doubt before May even arrives. I let that land. Classic. Go after the witness, ignore the evidence. I'd watched it work 100 times. Never imagined I'd be the one absorbing it. What should I be doing? Get yourself a lawyer. Document everything, every interaction with Claire and Garrett over the past 5 years. Every loan, every gift, every conversation you remember. And Leonard? She held my gaze. Be ready for Claire to take the stand against you. Sleep didn't come that night. I lay there watching shadows move across the ceiling, thinking about testimony about Claire in a witness box, Harker walking her through questions he'd spent weeks crafting. Did your father support your marriage? No. Did he attempt to control how you and your husband manage your finances? Yes. Did he become hostile when you declined his money? Truth reassembled into a weapon. It was genuinely clever. Harker had almost certainly drilled her for hours already. The following morning, I retained a lawyer, Alden Stroud, a civil litigator I'd crossed paths with during a corruption case years back. He ran $250 an hour, which was reasonable for Pittsburgh. We sat down in his office on Grant Street and went through Harker's complaint together. It's aggressive, Alden said, working through the pages. Defamation, invasion of privacy, intentional infliction of emotional distress. They're launching everything they've got. What am I actually exposed to? Worst case, they carry all counts. You're looking at $500,000 in damages. More likely, they want a settlement, $30,000 to $40,000 to close it out. You sign an NDA. Your testimony gets discredited before the criminal trial even begins. I won't settle. Alden looked up at me over his glasses. Leonard, I have to ask you directly. Is there anything in your history with Claire and Garrett that could come back on us? Anything Harker could put to work? I walked back through every dinner, every attempt to stay present in their lives. Lent them $50,000 toward the house, never returned. Covered the wedding, $32,000. Sent money for the grandchildren's birthdays, children I rarely got to see. Last time I offered any financial thoughts, Claire called me controlling. Did you ever say anything that could be read as threatening? Anything that might qualify as harassment? What comes next is where everything I thought I understood got turned inside out. The people closest to this fight were not all who they appeared to be, and the cost of what was coming would be higher than I had prepared for. Tell me if you suspected someone you loved was being used against you. Would you speak up right away, or would you wait and gather your proof first? I told them they were living beyond their means. That apparently qualified as harassment. Alden made notes. We'll need character witnesses, people who knew you, who knew your relationship with Claire before Garrett entered the picture. Bernice Langford, my neighbor Rudy Holt. From Pittsburgh PD, Adriana Fuentes, the prosecutor running the criminal case. She knows who I am. She knows I don't manufacture evidence. Good. He closed the folder. Discovery kicks off next week. Brace yourself. They'll ask for everything: bank statements, emails, text messages. The deposition alone will probably run 8 to 10 hours. Harker will be working to make you boil over. I spent 30 years putting people on the stand under pressure. I can manage Clifton Harker. Famous last words, as it turned out. The deposition fell on a gray February morning. Harker's conference room faced the Monongahela River glass and steel and carefully assembled signals of success. Garrett sat in the corner with Claire, both dressed as though attending a burial, my burial, presumably. Harker was polished, methodical, and relentless. Mr. Pruitt, you've stated you went to your daughter's home for water, yet you'd just come through a heated argument. Isn't it more accurate to say you went into that kitchen hunting for something to use against your son-in-law? No. You're a seasoned prosecutor. You know how to build a case. You were well aware that kitchen was where Garrett stored his work materials, weren't you? I knew it was where people generally keep glasses. Please respond to the question, Mr. Pruitt, Alden cut in. He just did. Harker smiled and turned a page. Let's turn to your relationship with Miss Claire Decker. You've provided her significant financial support over the years. Correct, I'm her father. $50,000 toward a house, $32,000 For a wedding, additional gifts, totaling roughly $15,000. Close to $100,000. Was that fatherly support or a method of control? Harker's voice stayed warm and measured. Isn't it true that once Claire began making her own financial choices alongside her husband, you grew resentful? No, you've stated you disapproved of their lifestyle. I disapproved of being asked for $25,000 when they still owed me $50,000. So, you were angry. I was let down. Angry enough to set out to dismantle your son-in-law's career. I reported a crime. That's what any citizen is supposed to do. Harker consulted his notes. Let the silence work. Textbook pressure tactic. Mr. Pruitt, isn't it true that you've long struggled with accepting your daughter's choices? Her marriage, her husband, her life built independent of you. I looked at Claire. She kept her eyes down. Garrett had his hand over hers, possessive proprietary. I've had difficulty, I said, deliberately accepting that my daughter bound herself to a man who robs wounded veterans. Objection, Alden said. Move to strike. Harker waved it aside. Withdrawn. Mr. Pruitt, setting aside the documents you reviewed under circumstances we dispute, do you have any independent evidence, any evidence at all that Garrett Decker committed crimes? I didn't review anything improperly. Those records were in open view. That's not what I asked. And there it was, the jaws of the trap. Say no, and I'm conceding I had no prior knowledge. Say yes, and I'd have to account for what else I'd uncovered. Because I had uncovered something else. Something I hadn't breathed a word of to Rudy, to Adriana, or to Alden. Something that shifted the whole picture. Mr. Pruitt Harker pressed. Shall I repeat the question? I glanced at Alden, a slight nod answer carefully. I have the same evidence the FBI has, I said. Bank records, wire transfers, fraudulent invoices. That's more than enough. Harker smiled as though I'd handed him something useful. Thank you, Mr. Pruitt. Nothing further. The deposition wrapped up. Garrett and Claire walked out without a glance back, their footsteps fading down Harker's expensive corridor. Alden collected his files and asked how I was holding up. I told him fine. I was lying. What I hadn't told him was this. 3 days after the police had taken Garrett's documents, I'd reached out to someone I probably shouldn't have, a private investigator named Otto Fenwick, an old contact from my prosecuting years who worked financial crimes and had more than a few favors to repay me. Just background, I said. Nothing that crosses any lines. Public records, social media, business filings. Otto came back to me 2 days later. Your son-in-law is a complicated man. Beyond the obvious, I turned up something else. He's been sending a woman named Petra Voigt $1,500 a month for the past 2 years, covering rent on an apartment in Lawrenceville. The name had been meaningless at the time. It wasn't anymore. I drove to Lawrenceville that same afternoon, violating every instruction Alden had given me about keeping my distance from the case. The address was a renovated brownstone on Butler Street. Expensive even by Lawrenceville standards. Rent probably ran $3,000 a month. I sat parked across the street for 20 minutes, feeling every year of my 63. What exactly was I doing out here, playing investigator, like I was still young and certain of my footing? The front door opened. A woman came out, late 20s, professional clothing, a briefcase under her arm. Not what I'd pictured, though. I couldn't have said what I'd been picturing. I stepped out of the car before I could reason myself back in. Excuse me, are you Petra? She stopped, wary. Who's asking? The name is Leonard Pruitt. I think we need to have a conversation about Garrett Decker. Her face moved through surprise, then recognition, then something resembling relief. You're Claire's father. You know Claire, I know of her. Petra glanced back toward the brownstone, then at me. How did you track me down? I spent 28 years as a prosecutor. Finding people was part of the work. She studied me for a beat. There's a coffee shop a couple of blocks from here. Red Hawk Coffee. Meet me there in 10 minutes. And Mr. Pruitt, come by yourself, or I'm gone. Red Hawk Coffee held a corner spot, all exposed brick and local artwork on the walls. Petra was already seated at a table in the back when I walked in, 2 cups waiting. Wasn't certain you'd show, I said. I almost didn't, she said. She kept both hands wrapped around her cup. But I've been waiting for someone to come around and ask the right questions. Might as well be you. What is your connection to Garrett? I was his accountant, past tense. She pulled out her phone and showed me a photograph of a signed contract. He brought me on 2 years ago to manage the foundation's books. Good pay, $3,600 a month, plus this apartment. Why the apartment? He said it made things simpler, long hours better to be near downtown. I told myself it was generous of him. Her laugh came out bitter. It was a bribe? For what, to keep my head down and not ask where the money was going? To process invoices I already knew were false. To push wire transfers to accounts that had nothing to do with veterans. She met my eyes squarely. I was part of it, Mr. Pruitt. I understood what he was doing, and I took his money all the same because $3,600 a month clears student debt fast. Then, why talk now? Because he fired me 3 weeks ago the moment I grew a conscience and started raising questions. My lease on that apartment runs out next month, and I can't cover it without his payments. And because I'm exhausted from being a piece of machinery that robs people who serve this country, she slid a flash drive across the table. This is everything. Every invoice, every transfer, every email where Garrett spelled out his instructions to me. Dates, amounts, account numbers, all of it. I stared at the drive. Why not hand this directly to the FBI? I did. 2 weeks ago. They said they'd follow up. Her smile had no warmth in it. The feds run at their own pace, and Harker is already laying groundwork for a defense that hangs everything on me. The rogue accountant who embezzled the funds and set up her boss. I need something working in my favor. What are you asking of me? Take this to the prosecutor. Let her know I'm willing to testify. Whatever plea arrangement they put in front of me, I'll take, but I want Garrett to answer for what he's done. She stood and looked at me directly. I looked you up, Mr. Pruitt. 28 years, 87% conviction rate prosecutor of the year in 2014. Men like that don't frame people who didn't earn it. If Garrett goes down, it'll be because he put himself there. She left. I remained at the table holding a flash drive that could bury Garrett entirely given to me by someone I couldn't acknowledge, without admitting I'd hired a private investigator and put the federal case at risk. Still, there were ways to get it to Adriana through channels that shielded Petra and kept me out of the chain. That evening, I drove to Rudy Holt's place in Mount Lebanon. His wife had dinner on beef stew that reminded me of better times while Rudy and I sat in his study with the door shut. You've got the look of a man who can't unknow something Rudy said. I laid it out for him. Petra the Flash drive the impossible corner I'd painted myself into. Leonard, you can't. I know that. But the information exists. If I happen to mention to Adriana that the FBI should circle back with a woman named Petra Voigt, accountant for Heroes Hope Foundation, would that constitute obstruction? Rudy went quiet for a moment. That would be a retired prosecutor passing along general background to a federal colleague. That happens. And if that prosecutor happened to surface new evidence from it, that's just solid investigative work. He refilled our glasses. Scotch, the expensive kind. You're walking a very fine line here. I've been walking fine lines for 30 years. This is different. This one involves your daughter, which is precisely why I can't stand aside and let a guilty man go free just because he married her. I called Adriana the following morning, professional careful. The FBI had interviewed an accountant named Petra Voigt, a former employee of Heroes Hope. You might want to follow up. Why would I do that? Adriana's tone was even, because accountants keep records especially when they sense they might need them someday. A pause. Thank you for the tip, Leonard. 2 weeks later, the Pittsburgh Dispatch ran a story. Former foundation accountant cooperating with federal investigation. The article named Petra Voigt, 32 years old, ACPA with 10 years of experience providing testimony and documentation in the Garrett Decker case. My phone rang within the hour. Harker's number. You just made a serious mistake, Leonard, he said, skipping any greeting. I don't know what you're talking about. Somehow, the FBI turned up my client's former accountant. Somehow she's sitting on documentation that never appeared in the original evidence file. Somehow all of this happened right after you brought in a private investigator. My blood went cold. I haven't hired anyone. Otto Fenwick $2,000 retainer drawn from your personal checking account 3 weeks ago. Public record. Leonard, you were a prosecutor. You know better than this. I'd been careless, stupid. Otto had logged the payment as income, which put it in the system. Mr. Fenwick performed legal research. I said choosing my words with care on my client's financial affairs, while my client is under federal investigation at the direction of a witness in that same investigation. It's called witness tampering, Leonard, or didn't they cover that in prosecutor school? He hung up. I stood in my kitchen holding the phone, understanding that I'd just handed Harker a weapon capable of destroying not only me, but potentially the entire case against Garrett. Alden Stroud called an hour later. Harker just filed an emergency motion to dismiss the criminal charges. Claims prosecutorial misconduct, witness tampering fruit of the poisonous tree. He's seeking sanctions against you and the federal prosecutors. Can he win? He shouldn't be able to. But he's making noise, and noise breeds doubt. The civil trial is 2 weeks out, Leonard. This just handed him everything he needs. That night, I sat in my study with the lights off, looking at photographs of Claire. Birthday parties, graduations, her wedding day. In every photo, she was smiling happy. Or at least I had believed so. Had I done the right thing, or had my righteous anger burned down whatever chance remained of repairing our relationship? The answer arrived the next morning. An envelope in my mailbox, no return address. Inside a single photograph. Garrett and Claire standing before a for sale sign outside their Shadyside home. On the back in Claire's handwriting, "We're losing everything because of you. I hope you're satisfied." But what snagged my attention was something else entirely. The Tesla was gone from the driveway. In its place sat a 12-year-old Toyota Camry, the first fracture in their flawless facade. And despite everything, despite the pain, the accusations, the civil suit that threatened to wipe me out, something cold and settled moved through my chest. Justice is slow, but it moves. The civil trial opened on a Monday morning in late February, under skies the color of old steel. Allegheny County Courthouse, 3rd floor. A courtroom I had walked through 1,000 times as a prosecutor. Now I sat at the defendant's table, Alden beside me, while Harker prepared to dismantle my reputation, piece by piece. Garrett and Claire sat across the aisle. She'd lost weight. Dark circles showed under her eyes. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by something off a rack at Macy's. Garrett wore the same suit from the deposition, though it had begun to show the wear. Financial strain was leaving its marks. Good. Judge Rosalind Beckwith, no relation to my neighbor Bernice, called the court to order. Harker rose smooth as silk. "Your Honor, this case concerns a man who could not accept his daughter's independence. Leonard Pruitt, a former prosecutor with nearly 3 decades of experience in criminal investigation, deliberately invaded my client's privacy to wreck their lives out of personal vendetta." Alden countered, "This case is about a father who uncovered evidence of a federal crime and did what any citizen should report it to the authorities. The investigation that followed exposed systemic fraud that preyed on wounded veterans." Harker's first witness was Claire. She took the stand in a navy dress, her hands trembling as she was sworn in. I wanted to look away. I couldn't. "Miss Decker, how would you describe your relationship with your father before all of this complicated?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "He was always generous, but there were strings attached. He needed to have a say in my decisions. Can you give an example? When Garrett and I bought our house, Dad lent us $50,000 for the down payment. But every time we saw him, he'd bring it up, ask about repayment, leave us feeling guilty for not having the money right away. That stung because it was partly true. I had mentioned it. Not to make them feel guilty, to remind them that loans get repaid. But context had no place in this room. And when you declined to follow his financial guidance, he became angry. He accused us of living beyond our means, of being reckless. He couldn't accept that Garrett had succeeded on his own. Harker walked her through the dinner, the confrontation, my return to their house. Claire painted me as controlling, manipulative, a man incapable of letting go. Some of it was her truth. Some was Garrett's coaching. I couldn't tell where one stopped and the other started. Alden's cross-examination was measured but precise. "Miss Decker, you testified that your father was controlling, yet he also paid for your wedding, correct?" "Yes, $32,000. Yes, and he asked for nothing in return." Claire hesitated. "No. He attended your children's birthday parties. Their school events brought gifts." "Yes. Until when?" "Until Garrett and I asked him to respect our boundaries." "By boundaries, do you mean his objection to being asked for $25,000 while still owed $50,000? Harker objected. Judge Beckwith sustained it, but the jury had already heard. The trial ran 3 days. Harker called Garrett, who testified about the dinner, the confrontation, finding me in his kitchen with his documents. He was effective on the stand. Ernest wounded the misunderstood son-in-law, just trying to serve veterans. When I saw Leonard with those papers, I knew exactly what he was after, Garrett said. He'd been searching for something to use against me for years. He finally found it. "Did you explain that those documents were confidential foundation business?" I tried. He wouldn't hear it. He was already on the phone with the police, already tearing apart my career. Alden's cross was surgical. Mr. Decker, those documents showed wire transfers to Delaware LLCs. Who owns those LLCs? Objection, Harker said. Outside the scope, Your Honor, Alden pressed. The witness has spoken to the nature of these documents. I should be permitted to explore what they actually contained. Overruled, Mr. Decker, please answer. Garrett's composure slipped just slightly. Those were legitimate business expenses for the foundation. Business expenses routed to accounts you controlled. The foundation maintained complex financial structures. Yes or no? Mr. Decker. Did you control those Delaware accounts? I had signatory authority to move foundation funds into accounts you controlled. Objection. Harker was on his feet. Sustained. Move on, Mr. Stroud. But the jury had seen it, had watched Garrett squirm. The turning point came Thursday afternoon. Harker called an expert witness, Dr. Irene Aldridge, a psychologist who specialized in family dynamics. She testified about parental control issues and financial manipulation in parent-adult-child relationships. In your professional opinion, Harker asked, is it consistent with controlling behavior for a parent to monitor their adult child's finances, press for loan repayment, and critique lifestyle choices? Absolutely. It's a well-documented pattern in families where the parent cannot reconcile themselves to the child's autonomy. Alden rose for cross-examination. Dr. Aldridge, you've never met Leonard Pruitt, correct? That's correct. Never interviewed him? Never performed a psychological evaluation? No. So, your testimony is drawn entirely from what Mr. Harker presented to you. I reviewed depositions and what the defense provided. You have no independent knowledge of Mr. Pruitt's character, his bond with his daughter, or what drove his actions. I can only speak to patterns of behavior that you've never personally observed. Thank you, Dr. Aldridge. Friday morning, Alden called his witnesses. Bernice Langford testified about knowing me for 15 years, about watching Claire grow up, about the way I had always put my daughter first. Did you ever see Leonard try to control Claire? Alden asked. I saw a father who loved his daughter, who helped her in every way he could, who was heartbroken when she stopped coming around. Rudy Holt testified about my career, my integrity, my standing in the prosecuting attorney's office. In your professional opinion, Detective Holt, would Leonard Pruitt fabricate evidence? No. Leonard taught me that the evidence speaks for itself. You don't need to manufacture anything when you're on the right side. Then Adriana Fuentes took the stand. Harker had fought to keep her off. Conflict of interest, he'd argued. Judge Beckwith allowed it for character testimony only. Ms. Fuentes, how do you know the defendant Leonard Pruitt mentored me when I was a new prosecutor? He taught me everything I know about building a case. In all that time, did he ever suggest falsifying evidence or going after defendants for personal reasons? Never. He taught me that prosecution isn't about winning, it's about truth. Harker's cross was aggressive. Ms. Fuentes, you are currently prosecuting Garrett Decker in federal court. Correct, I am. And you're testifying on behalf of the man who set that prosecution in motion. I'm testifying about his character. A witness whose credibility depends on my client going to prison. Objection, Alden said. Argumentative, sustained. But Harker's insinuation had already taken root. Tainted motive, compromised judgment, a verdict purchased by bias. Closing arguments filled that Friday afternoon. Harker's version cast me as a resentful old man strangling his daughter's independence. Alden's version cast me as a private citizen who'd seen wrongdoing and reported it. 6 hours, the jury deliberated, filing back at 8 p.m. In the matter of Decker versus Pruitt on the count of defamation, we find for the defendant. On the count of invasion of privacy, we find for the defendant. On the count of intentional infliction of emotional distress, we find for the defendant. 3 counts, 3 verdicts in my favor. Garrett went ashen. Claire wept. Harker collected his files with cold-leashed fury. Outside on the steps, Alden gripped my hand. Good result, Leonard. What comes next? We wait on the criminal case. May keep your eye on that. That's where it actually counts. I made the drive home through February dark, feeling scraped hollow. I'd won. A clean sweep. But winning sat strangely in my chest, and I couldn't account for why. My phone buzzed as I turned into the driveway. Unknown number, Mr. Pruitt. This is Greg Millar, Pittsburgh Dispatch. I'm writing a follow-up on the Decker matter. Could we talk? I nearly declined. Then Claire's testimony played back Garrett's wounded husband routine, the whole architecture Harker had built. Yes, I said. I have time. The piece ran Sunday morning. Leonard Pruitt vindicated in civil trial, but questions remain about Foundation scandal. Millard had done real work, found veterans whose claims had been quietly buried, traced the money through layered shell companies, spoken with Petra. The line they led with was mine. I didn't do this to hurt my daughter. I did it because men and women who served our country deserved better than to be stolen from. If that makes me the villain in someone's story, I can live with that. By Monday, it had spread everywhere. Veterans groups went loud on social media. The Foundation's board, the same one that had forced Garrett out, announced a restructuring and independent audit, and Harker filed notice that Garrett's bail was revoked. He'd broken his conditions, reached out to Petra, pressured her to revise her account. Garrett was being held until trial. Claire called Tuesday morning. The voice that came through the line was small and threadbare. "Dad, I need to see you." We met at the McKnight Road diner ground that belonged to neither of us, well clear of Shadyside's eyes, and the memories Squirrel Hill held. I got there. First asked for coffee. I had no intention of drinking, watched the entrance. When Claire walked in, she looked like 3 months had put 5 years on her. Hair pulled back, no makeup, jeans, and a sweater gone soft with wear. No trace of the put-together woman who'd faced me from the witness box 2 weeks earlier. She was someone who'd exhausted every last defense. She settled into the booth across from me without picking up a menu. "Thank you for coming," she said. "You're my daughter. I'll always come." Her eyes filled. She looked toward the window, steadied herself. "The bank took the house yesterday. 30 days, and we're out." I let that register. The Shadyside house, the one whose down payment I'd helped fund, gone. "I'm sorry. Are you—" "No accusation in it. Just fatigue worn down to the bone." "You won, Dad. Garrett's locked up. I've lost everything. You were right from the start. Does it feel the way you thought it would?" "No," I said, and meant it. "It feels like something that had to happen. That's a different thing entirely." She held up her phone, a screenshot of an email from Garrett's parents. "They're cutting ties. Said we shame them. Between attorneys and bail, they've poured over $150,000 into this, and they're finished. What about Garrett's lawyer? Harker's gone too. Unpaid." She made a sound that was almost a laugh. "Loyalty at $500 an hour has a short expiration date." The waitress refilled my cup. Claire ordered tea and left it alone. I visited Garrett yesterday. She wrapped both hands around her cup, through the glass. "He blamed you immediately, said, if you'd kept out of it, none of this exists. Said the money was always coming back, that you can't call it theft when repayment was always the plan. Federal wire fraud doesn't work on intentions. I know that now." Her voice broke slightly. "I know things now I didn't let myself know before, like how he gambled away nearly $200,000. Like the apartment in Lawrenceville I never knew existed. The payments he made to keep an accountant from talking. Petra? I've read her testimony. I know what she was." Claire looked straight at me. "She was a young woman who made a wrong turn and then tried to correct it. I'm 35 years old. I spent 8 years running cover for a man who robbed disabled veterans. What does that make me?" The question sat between us. Outside, March wind was pushing the remnants of old snow across the asphalt. "It makes you human," I said quietly. "We believe what we need to believe, especially about the people we've built our lives around." I said things in that courtroom, she continued. "Against you, damaging things. Some of them weren't wrong." She flinched before I could speak. "What I held the loan over your heads. I made judgments about how you chose to live. I wasn't faultless, Claire. I watched my daughter pulling away, and I chose pressure when I should have chosen patience. But about Garrett, you were right. Being right doesn't close the wound." We sat with that. The diner moved around us, other people's conversations, other lives still intact. "The kids talk about you," Claire said at last. "They can't understand why Grandpa stopped coming by, why their father isn't there, why they're moving somewhere smaller. What do you say to them? That grown-ups sometimes make serious mistakes, that their grandfather did what was right even when it cost him." She pressed her fingers beneath her eyes. "They miss you." My throat closed. "I miss them too. I've started divorce proceedings. My attorney expects it finalized before Garrett's criminal trial even opens." She drew papers from her bag and set them on the table, a petition for dissolution prepared by a legal aid attorney. I can't afford Harker's fee bracket or anything near it. The courthouse referral service found me someone. $200 an hour, which is already a stretch. "Claire, I'm not here about money, Dad. I'm here because you have a right to know, and because I need you to hear something. She held my gaze. I chose Garrett over you. I took his word against yours. I went into that courtroom and worked to ruin your name to shield a man who was running the same play on me he ran on everyone. You couldn't have known. I should have. You warned me. Carefully at first, then plainly. Every time I decided the problem was your need for control rather than genuine concern. She pushed the untouched tea aside. How does a person come back from that? I thought about the years at my desk, the defendants who'd understood too late what they had allowed themselves to become, and the rare ones who'd walked in asking for a path back and actually meant it. Honesty is the only way, I said. With yourself with me, with your children. You face what happened, take in what it taught you, and build something better from here. Can you forgive me? The question I'd been carrying. I looked at my daughter. Really looked and found the girl who'd gathered shells along the shore at Ocean City, who'd called me daddy until 12, made it feel too young, who'd asked me to be the one beside her at the altar, because I was still her standard of solid. Somewhere between that day and this booth, I'd lost her, or she'd lost herself. Maybe neither of us could fix the blame cleanly. I already have, I said, but Claire, forgiveness isn't amnesia. It means choosing to go forward in spite of what's behind us. That's slow work for both of us. She nodded, and the tears came without apology. One more thing can I ask? Anything? Will you be there for the kids? Not financially, just present. Consistent. They need something steady while everything shifts. I can't give them much right now, but you could. Yes. No hesitation. Whatever is needed, whatever they need. Some of the strain left her face, then returned as something darker. Garrett's trial opens in May. The prosecutor's office called. They need me to testify. Adriana Fuentes. Yes. She said my account of Garrett's finances, what I was aware of, and when is central to the case. But, Dad, if I take that stand, his family is done with me. Our neighbors, his friends' betrayal is the word they'll use. Did you know about the fraud? No. Not until you turned up those documents. I believed the foundation was real. I thought Garrett was genuinely helping people. She paused. But the gambling, I knew something, not the full scale. He bet on football, played poker online. He told me he had it managed. I chose to believe that. Then you take the stand and tell the truth, what you knew and what you didn't. The jury weighs the rest. He'll never forgive me. He spent years stealing from veterans and deceiving you. His feelings stopped being your burden. She sat with that a while. Outside, March sun punched through the cloud cover, spreading cold, flat light across the parking lot. There's one more thing, she said. The restructured foundation, the new board after Garrett was removed. They've asked whether I'd be willing to meet with some of the veterans whose applications were denied to apologize on behalf of the organization. Will you do it? I honestly don't know. What would I even say to them that my husband took the money, meant for you? However I phrase it, it comes out hollow. Hollow, probably. I didn't argue that point. But those people are owed the words anyway, even knowing words can't erase anything. Will you stand beside me when the time comes? I thought of my father, what he'd have expected. Not just that justice be done, but that someone look those people in the eye and own it. I'll be there, I said. We stayed another hour. She talked about the children, a rental she'd found, where the numbers made sense, her job, still hers barely. The HR director had issued a formal warning over the negative coverage. Pittsburgh, for all its size, moves gossip like a small town. Everyone ends up knowing your damage. When we finally rose to go, Claire held on to me, not a quick squeeze, not obligation, but something real, the kind she hadn't offered in years. I'm sorry, Dad, a whisper, for all of it. I know, I told her. We'll get through this. The gathering wound down, late. Every veteran shook my hand before leaving. Edna Quigley embraced me. Lass leaned close, murmured in my ear, Colt would have liked you. After the others had gone, Claire didn't rush. Can I bring the kids this weekend? Bo wants to help you build something. Willa wants to put flowers in the ground. Always, I said. She held me at the door. I love you, Dad. You kept reaching for me even after I let go. That's what parents do. Rudy had stayed to help clean up. After Claire left, the two of us moved through my study in easy quiet, the kind you only get from decades of knowing someone. You handled that right, Leonard, he said at last. Not every man would have made that call. Not every man had a father who served, who believed in something beyond himself. It cost you. It did, I said. and gave something back, not a replacement, something different. My daughter beginning to understand what integrity demands. My grandchildren inheriting a story that means something. The foundation doing the work it was built for. I looked at the plaque the veterans had mounted on my wall. Some prices are worth paying. September brought cooler air and the first turn of the leaves. Claire's apartment 4 blocks away became part of my weekly routine. Sunday dinners came back simpler than before, but honest in a way the old ones hadn't been. Bo and Willa filled my house with noise I hadn't realized I was missing. The restructured Heroes Hope Foundation was gaining ground. Under Wade's direction, with me advising on oversight, we cleared through the applications Garrett had rejected and funded initiatives that had been sitting idle. Donations kept arriving, people moved by the story, wanting to do something decent. One afternoon I crossed paths with Clifton Harker outside the courthouse. A curt nod. He kept walking. Some losses attorneys carry forever. Late September brought a letter from Garrett, prison mail screened by whoever handles such things. He'd written that Claire was obligated to bring the children to visit, that his parental rights stood, that she was turning them against him. I brought it to her. She read it without a word, then tore it in half. His rights, she said, ended when he stole from veterans and looked for someone else to blame. When the children are older, they'll decide for themselves. Good, I said. October came, with autumn running, full across Pittsburgh, leaves copper and gold air sharp, with the sense that something might still be possible. One evening in the garden, Bo beside me pressing tulip bulbs into the ground, I worked through something I hadn't been able to name clearly before. I'd begun this whole thing on anger, betrayed by my daughter, dismissed by my son-in-law, treated as an obstacle rather than family. I'd reported Garrett's crimes from duty and principle, but the wound underneath was personal. Now, I felt something else. Stillness. Acceptance, maybe. Justice had landed. Claire was rebuilding carefully with new limits and genuine respect between us. My grandchildren knew me. Veterans were receiving what had been owed. Garrett would surrender 14 years to federal prison, his name worthless, his freedom measured in decades. Claire was divorced, stretched thin financially, but standing. I'd wanted a steep price. Yet watching Bo settle each bulb into soil that would hold it through winter and push it into bloom, I finally grasped what my father had spent years trying to show me. Doing right can cost everything. And if you hold on, what returns isn't the same as what was lost. It can't be, but it's real, built on truth. Bo looked up at me, dirt on his nose. Grandpa Will, these really grow. Yes, I said. They need time and care and the right conditions. But they'll grow, just like families, just like justice, just like redemption, given enough time and people willing to do the work. United States of America versus Garrett Michael Decker, May Federal Courthouse Judge Corwin presiding. I sat beside Rudy and watched. Adriana Fuentes' opening didn't soften anything. Garrett Decker stole $427,000 from wounded veterans. When questioned, he fired people. When discovered, he came after his father-in-law. The trial ran 8 days. Federal accountants traced every dollar into offshore gambling accounts, $183,000 to online poker. Petra Voigt testified about fraudulent invoices she'd processed. I chose comfort over conscience until I sat across from a veteran who'd been denied help, while Garrett had $400,000 in the bank. When I confronted him, he fired me and threatened my career. Ernesto Varela wheeled into the courtroom. I applied for a specialized chair, $3,200, denied twice while Garrett was buying luxury cars. 4 more veterans followed. Applications denied, promises broken. Claire took the stand. I knew nothing about the foundation's finances. I trusted Garrett. Her voice cracked. When my father found the documents, it took months to accept the truth. Asked about the divorce, she looked straight at Garrett. My lifestyle collapsed because he stole from people who gave up everything. There's nothing convenient about discovering who you actually married. Garrett didn't testify. Adriana's closing was precise. Garrett Decker chose himself over veterans every single time. This isn't complicated. It's theft. 11 hours of deliberation. Guilty. 14 counts. All of them. As marshals led him out, Garrett fixed Claire with pure accusation. She didn't flinch. Outside, she told reporters, "My ex-husband hurt many people, but the veterans suffered most. Silence enables bad people. My father spoke up when it mattered." At her apartment, reality settled in. Adriana thinks 12 to 15 years, good Claire said, firm. The children deserve to grow up free of his influence. The restructured foundation wanted me to meet 6 veterans whose applications had been denied. They wanted to offer their thanks. I'll be there. The meeting at the Veterans Affairs Office brought 6 veterans, Claire and me, together. Ernesto Varela, Lorinda Keach, with her service dog, Hector Cadena, Floyd Creech, Sung Baxter, and Edna Quigley. A woman in her 70s, a folder pressed between her hands. Her son Colt was denied assistance, Wade Prentice said quietly. Then, Colt passed 6 months ago. He'd been waiting on medical equipment, $17,000. He ran out of time. Silence. I'm so sorry, Claire whispered. Edna looked at her steadily. You lived in his house, spent his money. Did you ask yourself where it was coming from? I chose to believe his lies because the truth was unbearable. Claire held her gaze. I failed your son. I will spend my life trying to do better. Ernesto moved forward. Mr. Pruitt, you had a way out. You went to the police instead. You let them tear apart what you had with your daughter so we could get justice. Lorinda Keach spoke. My service dog cost $11,000. Garrett denied me 3 times. The new foundation approved it in 2 weeks because you didn't let him hide. Hector Cadena held up a photograph. A young man, early 20s. That's me. Garrett killed my prosthetic upgrade. $4,200. I wore an ill-fitting prosthetic for 3 years. Infections, nerve damage. Edna opened her folder to a photo, a young soldier bright-eyed. This is what Garrett took from me. My son, my future, grandchildren who will never exist. Claire wept. I don't know how to make this right. You can't, Edna said, but you can tell the truth. You can live differently. Wade announced the foundation had raised $280,000 from new donors and approved every denied application. They presented a plaque in recognition of Leonard Pruitt, whose courage and integrity ensured those who served received what they deserved. My father would have been proud. Claire visited Garrett in detention 3 days later. She came out stone-faced. He blamed you, said we'd still have our life if you'd stayed out of it. He wanted a letter from me requesting leniency. What did you tell him? That he destroyed lives for money and deserves every year he gets. A pause. Then I went through all of it, Edna's son, Ernesto, Lorinda, every one of them. I needed him to hear their names. How did he react? He ended the call and walked out. Even now, he can't face what he did. That evening, I had Bo and Willa over. Within an hour, we were reading stories, knocking over towers, making cookies. Ordinary grandfather things I'd gone without too long. Claire stood in the doorway watching something close to peace on her face. Thank you for not giving up on us, she said. Garrett's sentencing in late June filled Judge Corwin's courtroom. He sat in an orange jumpsuit, diminished the months of confinement had taken something from him. Adriana recommended 12 years. The public defender argued for leniency. It landed hollow. Edna Quigley spoke first. My son believed people would honor his sacrifice. Garrett Decker taught him that belief was dead wrong. Ernesto Varela followed. Nothing hit me harder than learning the man who denied my assistance had spent money, meant for people like me, on luxury cars. 4 more veterans took the stand. Then, Lorinda Keach. I hope every single day behind bars you think about the veterans you wounded. Garrett's jaw went tight. Judge Corwin asked whether Garrett wished to address the court. Against his counsel's advice, he rose. I got in over my head, I made mistakes, but the press turned this into something it never was. My former father-in-law used his prosecutorial background as a weapon because he couldn't stomach that his daughter chose me. Even now, not a word of accountability. Judge Corwin's face remained stone. You stole from people who gave everything they had. You've shown no remorse. The court sentenced him to 14 years in federal prison, 3 years of supervised release and full restitution of $427,000. 14 years. Garrett's face drained of color. As the officers let him out, he turned to Claire with accusation in his eyes. She didn't flinch. Outside, Claire told the cameras, "Silence is what lets bad people keep going. My father spoke up when it counted. I should have listened to him sooner." Back at my house, we gathered. Veterans Wade, Rudy Bernice, Adriana, Colt. Ernesto raised his glass. To Leonard Pruitt, who showed that doing what's right matters more than family loyalty when family is wrong. Later, Claire and I found a quiet moment to talk. Garrett said you weaponized your experience. Was he right? I paused. I recognized the patterns the moment I saw them, I admitted. I understood exactly what evidence prosecutors would need, but I didn't invent the crimes. I just wasn't able to look the other way. I forgave you months ago, she said. But I had to set limits. You're my father, and I love you. That doesn't give you the right to treat me like a wallet. Can I bring the kids by this weekend? Yes, always, yes. After the others had gone, Rudy lingered. You did good, Leonard. It cost me and gave you something back. Your daughter is learning what integrity looks like. Your grandchildren will grow up knowing their grandfather stood for something. I looked at the plaque. Some prices are worth every penny. September brought Sunday dinners with Claire and the kids. The foundation was thriving under Wade's leadership. I crossed paths with Clifton Harker at the courthouse. He gave a curt nod and kept moving. Garrett sent a letter demanding Claire bring the children to see him. Claire tore it up. The kids will make that decision for themselves when they're old enough. October came. I was out in the garden with Bo putting bulbs in the ground for spring. Something settled in me. I'd started all of this burning with anger. Now there was peace in its place. Justice had run its course. My bond with Claire was being rebuilt on new terms. My grandchildren knew who their grandfather was. Veterans were receiving the help they deserved. Garrett would be behind bars for 14 years. Claire was divorced, but she was standing taller than she had in years. I'd won at real cost. Yet watching Bo press tulip bulbs into the earth, I finally understood what my father had been trying to show me. Sometimes doing the right thing takes everything from you, and sometimes, if you can hold on long enough, what comes back is better than what you lost. Not the same, never the same, but real honest, built on truth rather than lies. Bo looked up. Grandpa Will, these actually grow. Yes, I told him. They just need time and care and they'll grow. Same as families, same as justice, same as redemption. Given enough time, the right conditions, and people who are willing to put in the work. That tulip Bo pressed into the ground that October afternoon. I think about it more than I probably should. It took the whole winter before it meant anything at all. This journey cost me my daughter's trust, for a season my son-in-law's pretended goodwill, and more nights of doubt than I care to count. What I got back was something I hadn't even known. I was missing a relationship with Claire built on honesty instead of politeness, and grandchildren who will one day understand that their grandfather did not look away when it mattered. I believe God doesn't always spare us from the hard road. Sometimes He just makes sure the hard road leads somewhere worth going. If this family revenge story taught me anything, it's this. First, loyalty to family is not the same as loyalty to silence. The two get confused more often than they should, and the confusion always costs someone. Second, if someone you love is being harmed and you have the knowledge and the standing to act, waiting for a better moment is not kindness, it is a choice you will have to live with. Third, the people who call your integrity a weapon are usually the ones it threatens most. Let them talk. Fourth, justice moves slowly, and it asks a great deal of the people who pursue it, but it does move. If this story of Dad's revenge stayed with you, if any part of Leonard's road felt familiar, I'd ask you to leave a thought in the comments below. Tell me where it hit you, and if you know someone carrying a burden like this one, pass the story along. It might be exactly what they need to hear today. Subscribe to Dad's Revenge if you haven't already, so you don't miss what comes next. Thank you for being here. Take care of yourselves, and I'll talk to you soon.